let's get the Boston Celtics out of the way.
Mhm.
They win the NBA title in one of the worst and most boring NBA finals I can remember as a basketball fan. I turned it off at halftime.
Mhm.
As a Sixers fan, it pained me to watch Boston win, but it did make me happy that the one person that they championed, which was Jason Tatum, didn't
Mhm.
win Eastern Conference Finals MVP, didn't win Finals MVP. And yeah, it just made me happy that he didn't get any kind of accolades. But, you know, watching Boston and what they did, they dominated the entire NBA season, all jokes aside. I have to give credit to where credit's due. They not only did they win, they did it like the greatest Boston athlete of all time, Tom Brady did. They just beat the respect out of you. Like you are going to respect us.
Yeah.
And I mean, they I pulled up some stats. I mean, they had some ridiculous records that they broke this season. They had an NBA record of 10 30-point wins. They also had an NBA record of 3 50-point wins. They had 17 25-point wins. They had more 30-point leads than they had 10-point deficits all this season. They had 17 30-point leads and they only had 16 10-point deficits. They've won or tied season series except one, like with Denver, right? Like I wanted the dream matchup would have been Denver versus Boston. I would have loved to see them because, granted, you can only play who you play. Boston really didn't play anybody higher than a 4 seed. Injuries had a lot to do with that. Tyrese Halliburton, even though he played 2 games, was hurt. The best player for the Pacers, obviously with Joel Embiid and the Sixers, lost to the Knicks, which changed, how the seeding was going. So you ducked Joel Embiid and the Sixers. You ducked Miami, or Miami didn't have full strength, right? Because Jimmy Butler was out. Giannis was hurt, so he didn't play at all. It just the East. It was easy. It was an easier path. But again, it's hard to say that when they were the number 1 seed in the league, I believe, definitely the number 1 seed in the East with 60 wins. So it's kind of hard to discredit, but the playoffs are different. And when you don't play the strongest competition at their strongest, it leaves seeds of doubt to basketball fans for me. But their longest losing streak was 2 games this season. They were just dominant. They just dominated. They were the best team in the league, and it's not even close. And so you have Jason Tatum. He has won an NBA title at an earlier age than Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Shaq, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. So it's hard to argue. Again, you can bring up the injuries if you want, and you can complain about how they won their games pretty easily, but to me, it's nitpicking. And I'm a Sixers fan, but empirically, statistically, whatever data you want to kind of crunch, they were the best teams and probably one of the best teams we've ever seen, in at least in a season. We'll see where that goes in the future. I mean, they have all their young talent locked up.
I was gonna say, are they built for is this built to be dynasty level?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny where we've come because we went from, they were just in the finals 2 years ago, or and it was like, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can't get it done together, and even though Jason Tatum's stats were impressive in the finals, he didn't win the Finals MVP, even though his stats, if you looked at the box score, and you're like, oh no, he was the best player. Stats kind of can lie to you when you just look at box scores. You kind of have to watch the game. Jaylen Brown, even though he only had 21 points, he locked up Luka Doncic. And when the Mavs were kind of making a run, I mean, basically all through the playoffs, every big shot came from Jaylen Brown. So it was a very lopsided finals, I guess a lopsided playoffs, but watching Boston this season has been frustrating as a Sixers fan, but as a basketball fan, pretty amazing to watch.
I think even if you're not a fan of basketball, seeing that city win anything, if you're not from Boston, is infuriating. Yeah. And it's at this point, it's pure jealousy, the amount of parades that they've been able to see versus other major cities like Philadelphia or New York is just it's just gross. Those kids have no good they have no clue how good they have it growing up there. Although I will say we're witnessing depending on, I mean, particularly for New England fans too, if New England doesn't win a championship in the next decade, we have our next generation Dallas Cowboy fans, is what it comes down to. They'll just
Oh yeah.
continue to talk about how good Boston sports teams were in, the early 2000s to, 2010s, whatever the fuck we're calling them. But yeah, I mean, look, they like you said, they just absolutely dominated. And I don't want to say I feel bad for the Mavs, because I don't. Because it was just poor. They were poor disciplined through and through. Just doing dumb shit. And like when you make it to that level, when you make it to that stage, it's hard enough to get there. But man, you got to keep your composure and just like button up and let's go. At least they didn't get swept.
Yeah, and part of me thinks that was by design. I honestly think that Boston, just the way the games have gone, I think Boston, it looks like they lost on purpose because they wanted to win at home. It's funny you bring up the Mavs. Luka Doncic, man. I love Luka Doncic as a player. I think he's one of the best. But, man, you're playing the Boston Celtics, not the Boston referees.
Yo.
Like, shut the fuck up. Every time there was a turnover or he made a bad play, he's laying on the ground, he's looking at the refs while the rest of the other team is on transition offense, which means his team's in transition defense, and they're getting easy baskets because they're playing 5-on-4 because you're sitting there looking at the refs. He did really good in game 4 at home with that, and shocker, they won. But when things go bad, it's like, come on, man, you got to let's just play the game. There's been reports that people from Slovenia that were in the game that spoke Slovenian were yelling at Luka, telling him to stop talking to the refs. Like,
really?
His own people, like, were yelling at him, begging him to stop talking to the referees. Luka, if you're going to be a superstar in this league, you have to earn those calls. They'll give them to you. You have the talent to get those calls. You'll get them. But when you are, Brian Windhorst brought this up on ESPN, visibly frustrated and verbally frustrated with Luka, especially after game 3. Stop talking to the refs, because what you're doing is you're not going to get the calls you want.
Yeah.
And you're making it harder for your team because they're not going to get the calls. The refs will retaliate, whether that's right, whether you want to have an integrity conversation, fine. It is what it is. It's part of the game. And which brings me to Kyrie Irving. Dude.
So I didn't mention him because I knew you were going to bring him up.
Holy shit, buddy. Ty, I wish Ty was here. And if Ty, you're listening, respond, because this is your boy. And I laid off him because I've been proud of Kyrie and I've been kind of singing his praises all season.
Yep.
So don't say that I've backed off of him. But Kyrie was terrible in the finals.
Yes.
He dropped a dud in almost every he dropped a dud in every single away game. If he played up to his offensive talent like he had all season, the series looks way different. You know what you're going to get with Luka. Luka doesn't play defense. Luka is just this is what got the Mavs there, so it's hard to fault Luka. But honestly, Luka was playing by himself this entire finals. Kyrie gave you 1.5 good games in this final series. And what did I see after Boston ended up winning? Kyrie Irving smiling, dapping up the Celtics players like he's leaving a family barbecue. What are you doing, bud? What are you doing? I get it. The way you left Boston, never mind the stat that you're 0-13 since you stepped on the Leprechaun logo.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that you called the Boston Celtic fan base a cult. I get it, man. It's probably really hard to be on the wrong side of Boston hatred, right? Like Boston fans will hate you if you're like a Yankee or a Sixer or any other of the team rivals. But we know what's out there about the Boston fans and kind of that culture out there. So as a black man, it's probably very hard when you go out of your way to kind of antagonize that side of the fan base. I'm not saying all the fans are like that, but we know who the fans are, and we know what comes with being a Boston fan, or what it can mean, I guess, if you're of a certain pigment. But he's out there like he's on this like spiritual healing tour, right? Like this was his chance to kind of overcome that. And if he would have done that, especially winning this game, and extending the finals, it would have done wonders for him, I think, as a person. I think it bothers him how he left Boston. I think he is embarrassed for himself, and I think he feels like he didn't represent himself properly, which obviously we know that he cares about.
Yeah.
and how his, I guess he acts like he doesn't care how he's viewed, but he kind of talks about how he's viewed all the time. And so, yeah, I was very disappointed in Kyrie. Less about how he acted after the game, but just how he didn't help, because a lot of their game, a lot of the Mavericks' success in their game comes from Kyrie being able to drive and kick out and get alley-oops for those other guys. When the role players have to do it on themselves, we see what happens. They're useless. And now Luka has to play 1-on-5 offense, and Kyrie really let Luka down in this final series. I don't know if you've kind of seen any of that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we were talking about it since what, game one
Yeah.
of the finals, of just like, what, like, hey, put him on the back of a milk carton. Where is he? What's happening?
Yeah.
You know, is it a matter of just matchups, or is it a matter of running out of gas? But I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, obviously you know it inside and out, and it's disappointing to say the least. Given everything that you did just say, knowing that, you know, he does just care about how he's viewed, and it isn't, you know, I'll say this, it isn't a good look to just completely not show up, quote unquote, and then at the end, like, look, you want to be good sportsmanship, like, you know, good sport, and have good sportsmanship, but at the same time, it's like, man, if I'm a Mavs fan and I'm seeing that, I'm just like, come on, did you even take this seriously? Like, I get these are some of your old friends, but like, man, I just wanted to see a little bit more competitiveness.